Discover the incredible truth behind 7 ancient Rome arena spectacles that shocked the world. Emily stood before her empty classroom, a faint swirl of dust dancing in the beams of late afternoon sunlight. The crispness of the chalky air felt oppressive, each breath heavy with the weight of failure. Just weeks ago, she had been a respected instructor at a prestigious university, pouring her passion for history into eager young minds. Now, she was back in her hometown, teaching middle school in a small, Midwest town, feeling the sting of being undervalued. "What now?" whispered an internal voice that had grown louder with each passing day. As she contemplated the ancient Roman arena spectacles that had once enamored her childhood imagination, excitement ignited a spark within her. Those larger-than-life tales of gladiators and grandiose battles hinted at moral complexities far beyond the bloodshed, revealing a world grappling with fate and injustice. She could feel the question nodding inside her: could she convey that truth to her apathetic, trend-focused students? Would they even care? Her mind swirled with indecision. She had already faced scorn after her public dismissal, criticized by colleagues and community historians alike. Had she wasted years immersing herself in trivial pursuits? The fear of inadequacy clawed at her self-worth, making her hesitate at the threshold of an opportunity that only felt like a mirage. But then the urgency to instill a sense of justice and integrity began to build, forcing her to act. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Returning to her research, Emily dove deep into the truth behind those spectacles, unearthing layers of raw humanity, ethical dilemmas, and societal parallels that sent her anxiety spiraling. In her solitude, she pondered, how could she unravel complex narratives about justice and privilege for students distracted by social media posts? With every revelation came an eruption of self-doubt, eroding her confidence like water against stone. As the deadline for the annual town history fair approached, Emily's heart tangled in her throat. Could she transform the perceptions that had dismissed her as a local historian? The moral dilemmas embedded within her research resonated deeply. They echoed the social injustices simmering in contemporary America, but how could she communicate that effectively? The late-night silence of her home was often broken by the barrage of her insecurities. And in the quiet moments, she shuddered at the sound of footsteps echoing in that crowded space where she would present her findings. It was not just a stage for her research, it was her moment to shatter the preconceived notions that loomed over her. Could she truly uplift understanding in a town where conformity felt more valued than authenticity? With every passing day, the pressure intensified, leaving her physically drained yet mentally alert, vigilant for an opportunity to redefine herself. But just as quickly as determination surged, the looming shadow of fear crept beside it, twisting her insides into knots. Could one woman, isolated in her struggle for truth, truly challenge the silence that engulfed a community? As she prepared to step forward, a single question haunted her mind: what if she was never heard? Emily's restless nights blended into harried mornings, blurring her perception of time. The looming date crept closer, and with it, the relentless churning of ideas in her mind heightened her anxiety. Each thought cascaded into another until they formed a torrential current, threatening to sweep her away, leaving her stranded in a sea of doubt. She recalled Emily Bronte's words about the shadow of her fears, the specter that lurked just beyond the edges of her resolve. Yet, each day she felt a flicker of intention fighting against that shadow. Instances from her research blurred together: the destitute citizens demonized as spectacles for the crowds, the power dynamics woven into the fabric of entertainment, and the silent cries for justice that echoed across time. Determined, she set her sights on drafting her presentation. Visions of her former life as a lecturer filled her mind, where narrative and engagement came naturally, drawing students into the depths of history. This was her battlefield now, a middle school classroom, a place where she could ignite flames of curiosity in young minds, transforming annoyance into intrigue. She began creating an experience, intertwining stories of ancient Rome's brutal competitions with modern parallels. The power of storytelling became her weapon against indifference. She envisioned a lesson where she would challenge her students to draw connections between the public's fascination with violence in ancient times and their present-day distractions, video games and sensational news. But as the lesson plan unfolded, so did her insecurities. What if the students returned the spark with blank stares? What if her own past influences extinguished her voice before she even began? Would her attempts at presenting the harsh realities of the human condition resonate or fall flat in a world that increasingly preferred facade over authenticity, fueled by determination? Emily mapped out her lesson. She included videos, images, and interactive discussions, drawing from contemporary pop culture to keep the students engaged. Each slide was designed to peel back their layers of disinterest, revealing deeper aspects of their emotional responses to narratives of justice and cruelty. With every iteration, her resolve solidified. This wasn't merely a lesson but a personal revolution. In that moment, she chose to redefine her role. She would not simply be another teacher conforming to the status quo. She would be a woman forging pathways through the battlefield of ignorance, challenging her students to critically assess their world. As she prepared to test her presentation on her test audience, a few local friends willing to give constructive feedback, an unexpected text arrived. It was from her former colleague, Sam, the one person who had stood by her after her dismissal. "Hey, just checking in on you. Heard about the fair. Let's catch up." Her heart raced. Could this be the lifeline she needed? Perhaps Sam could offer insights or support, more than she had anticipated. Still, the ambiguity of the message left her with questions resonating through her mind. Should she bring her new ideas to him? Would he uplift her aspirations or drag her back into contemplation of her past failures? A gnawing uncertainty began to strangle her resolve. Again, taking a deep breath, she composed herself to respond. Maybe it was time to confront those fears, not just by sharing her journey with others, but by inviting input from those outside her emerging circle. She leaned into her capacity to evolve, recognizing that vulnerability was her new strength. As she hit send, Emily felt the weight of indecision lift slightly. This meeting, she mused, could be the catalyst for scaling the walls of doubt shrouding her path. But as the thought settled, another struck her: what if revisiting her past only opened old wounds? The question lingered, electric in its potential for growth or harm, leaving her teetering on the brink of a decision that could alter her trajectory yet again. Emily arrived at the small coffee shop, her heart pounding slightly, each beat echoing the uncertainty of what was to come. As she scanned the room, she noticed Sam across a sunlit table, his warm smile momentarily easing the tension in her chest. They hadn't seen each other since her departure from academia. His steady presence had always been a balm for her insecurities. Yet now, she felt an undercurrent of dread as she approached. "Hey, it's been a while," she said, forcing enthusiasm into her voice. She slid into the seat, acutely aware of how this meeting represented a potential turning point. "Yeah, it really has. I've thought about you," Sam replied, his eyes locking onto hers with a sincerity that made her feel both special and vulnerable. "I'm glad you reached out. I heard you're working on a new project." Emily hesitated, weighing the words on her tongue. Sharing her idea meant exposing her ambitions to scrutiny, but she also craved validation. "I'm trying to develop a lesson that connects ancient Roman spectacles to how we engage with violence and justice today," she stated, her voice steadier than she felt. Sam leaned forward, intrigued. "That sounds fascinating. How are you planning to present it?" As Emily unraveled her ideas, she felt a flicker of hope, a pulse of passion resurrected. She described how she aimed to peel away layers of apathy among her students with stunning visuals and challenging discussions. Every laugh, every skeptical expression on Sam's face as he processed her concepts became a small victory against her doubts. But as she described the potential pitfalls, the fear seeped back in. What if I can't connect with them? What if they're too jaded to care? The words tumbled out, betraying the worry that hadn't fully dissipated. "Emily," Sam paused, choosing his words carefully. You've always been great at creating connections, don't doubt that. Students can sense genuine passion. You've got this. His encouragement lit a spark, but the intense heat of the moment also brought back memories of her recent failure, the brutal showdown with institutional authority that had stripped her of her former title. Would she truly be effective this time? Thanks, it means a lot. I just hope I'm not setting myself up for another fall, she confessed, the honesty surprising her. Vulnerability had become her new strategy, yet laying it bare felt both liberating and terrifying. Look, we all face setbacks. The important thing is to keep pushing forward. You've got the wisdom from your past to guide you. Use it. His words anchored her, and for a moment, she imagined the lesson unfolding successfully in the classroom, the students rapt and engaged, their initial disinterest transformed into a chorus of questions and reflections, yet, doubt loomed like a dark cloud following angelic reassurance. But what if revisiting the past means getting trapped in its shadows again? She asked quietly, a trembling admission. What if it pulls me back? Only if you allow it to. You're not the same person you were then, Emily. You're growing, and that essay risk worth taking, he replied, his gaze unwavering. The weight of his belief in her reignited something deep inside that as the conversation shifted, their cups emptied. While discussing the intricacies of teaching, a troubling realization flickered in her mind. Sam embodied the very past she feared confronting. Could she navigate a discussion without letting old anxieties derail her newfound ambitions? By the time she stood to leave, determination mingled with the uncertainty. There was a cost to growth facing the past, confronting fears. But this engagement with Sam could also fortify her resolve. As she stepped out into the bustling street, Emily felt an unfamiliar sensation and increasing urgency to chase her aspirations, yet entwined with the fear of failing. Commitments of the past whispered in her ears. The lesson awaited her, and she'd have to position herself boldly. And as the shadows shifted with the fading sunlight, one lingering thought chased her with relentless insistence: what if she needed to confront not just her students, but the very fears that had once defined her, to truly embrace the next step in her developmental journey? Walking home, Emily was enveloped in a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. Each footstep echoed her determination, but it was marred by the incessant whisper of self-doubt. The sunlight seemed to dim just a notch as she pondered the path ahead, wrestling with the lingering shadows Sam had unintentionally stirred. The possibility of failure weighed heavier than she anticipated. She recalled how, during her last tenure, the oppressive atmosphere had suffocated her creativity. The demands of the institution had become a chain, binding her to the past rather than freeing her to explore innovative teaching techniques. Yet there she was, preparing to crawl back into the very arena that had once devoured her confidence. Arriving at her apartment, she placed her keys on the worn table by the door and took a deep breath. This was her space. A canvas that had been neglected now stood bathed in the glow of a new intention. She wanted to transform it into a hub of inspiration and strategy, rather than a refuge from her fears. The clutter of dusty books and scattered paper represented ideas waiting to be reborn. Emily set to work, organizing her materials. Creating a detailed outline of her lesson, she meticulously mapped the connections she would convey to her students. Each connection was like a thread, intricately woven to depict the rich tapestry of human experience, past and present. She could already envision their faces, some pensive, some skeptical as they grappled with the complexity of justice and violence across time, but doubt still eclipsed her enthusiasm. What authority did she possess to engage her students in such poignant matters? She had to confront the ghosts of her past, those voices reminding her of every misstep and misjudgment. In her mind, she replayed the harsh feedback from her previous position, the discouragement that had made her question her abilities. That fear of rejection loomed overhead, propelling her thoughts into darker territories. Benign memories morphed into magnified criticisms. Taking a pause, Emily reminded herself of Sam's words: the wisdom gained from setbacks could guide her forward. Could she tap into that experience to build an environment where her students felt their own voices mattered? Could she show them that even the most jaded minds can flicker with a spark if given the right catalyst? A sudden urgency gripped her. The lesson plan not only had the potential to ignite passion in her students, it could also serve as a personal reclamation, a bold declaration that she belonged in this realm of intellectual exchange. Each captivating story from the ancient world could bridge the gap between past and present, breathing new life into their discussions. By the time the daylight faded, she felt an unexpected peace settle over her, choosing to embrace the discomfort rather than retreat into it. She recalled the moments shared with Sam, how confronting her insecurities in conversation had tampered with the dread they invoked. Maybe vulnerability was not a weakness, perhaps acknowledging her fears could become the cornerstone of her teaching style, an invitation for her students to share their own doubts alongside their discoveries. Just then, a message pinged on her phone, shattering the moment of calm. A new notification from her academic network, an invitation to present. The thought gripped her, a mixture of excitement and trepidation bubbling within. Could she take a leap and showcase her lesson to her peers? And with that messy cocktail of emotions rushing through her, she found herself staring at the screen, heart racing anew. Was this the juncture where she would stand against her fears and assert her voice in academia, or would she retreat once again? Now the choice lay before her own ambitions. The shadows of her past hung heavy yet tantalizingly close to the surface of her newfound resolve. Would she answer the call, or let the moment slip away? Emily sat at her small dining table, the screen of her laptop illuminating her face in the dim light of the room. Her heart thudded against her chest as she reread the presentation invitation. It felt like an external challenge, but it also mirrored an internal struggle. Was this a chance to contribute to the academic discourse, or merely a platform to expose her vulnerabilities? The dichotomy messily twisted within her, punctuating every breath she took. The decision weighed heavily, each tick of the clock amplifying her trepidation. She envisioned standing before her colleagues, the air thick with expectation, their eyes piercing but curious, waiting to gauge her worthiness. What if she stumbled over her words? What if the old ghosts resurfaced, mocking her from the recesses of her mind? A chain of internalized failures gripped her thoughts, pulling her into a spiral of anxious what-ifs. Yet, in that moment, another thought pierced through the fog of doubt: what if she succeeded? What if this presentation became the turning point in her career, a bridge from the fears that confined her into the realm of confidence and possibility? She caught herself recalling her favorite historical figures, those who had stepped into the ring against the odds. They became her silent advocates, whispering encouragement to embrace her role not merely as a teacher but as a thinker and creator. With a determined sigh, Emily began to draft ideas for her presentation, not just focusing on the content but the form it would take. She instinctively leaned towards storytelling, weaving narratives from the stories she planned to share with her students. What story could she tell her colleagues that could open their hearts and minds, just as she hoped to do for her students? She envisioned her lesson as an exploration where students felt free to question, to challenge, and even to disagree. Each word she typed became a part of the reclamation process, an act of defiance against the doubt that loitered in the corners of her mind. Slowly, confidence began to manifest. Recognizing the cyclical nature of education, she understood that what she prepared for her colleagues would also enhance her students' experiences. If she could ignite their inquiries into history and justice, perhaps they would unearth their latent potential, mirroring her own transformation. But as she crafted her narrative, a sense of trepidation returned. Emily leaned back and closed her eyes, wrestling with the specter of failure again. She recognized the truth: the roots of her fear ran deep, they were woven from experiences that had nearly extinguished her passion. Teaching seemed to awaken profound vulnerabilities rather than a robust identity. Standing before an audience brought to light every instance of despair she had ever felt in her role. Rather than retreating into those shadows, she latched onto the idea of confronting her fears head-on. The act of stepping forward for this presentation could demystify her anxieties and reveal them not as the end of her journey but as integral threads in its fabric. With newfound determination, she set a deadline for when she would finalize her presentation. Yet, as she readied herself to hit send, doubt began spinning anew in her mind. How would her colleagues perceive her? Would they see her struggle, or would they appreciate her courage? The answer remained elusive, lingering just out of reach. Taking a deep breath, Emily resolved that she would not allow uncertainty to dictate her narrative. It was time to reclaim the stage, time to rise from the ashes of self-doubt, to embody resilience in all its forms, and as she hovered above the send button, a question formed in her mind, echoing louder than the others: would this single moment of choice determine her future, or would it simply be a step in her long journey? She pressed the button, uncertainty spiraling around her. However, in that vulnerable act, she also felt a pulse of excitement. It wasn't just a submission, it was an acknowledgement of her growth. The commitment to share her voice was a definitive step towards clarity, a path less encumbered by the chains of her insecurities. Now, as she leaned back into the chair, pulse quickening with both dread and delight, she wondered, would this leap reshape her narrative in the academic world? The butterflies that danced in her stomach whispered of the potential for rebirth as Emily braced herself for the challenges that lay ahead. She understood that tackling not only her own fears but also the landscape of academia would be no small task, one that could redefine her identity, and as the screen dimmed, it struck her the real challenge was yet to come. Would her voice resonate with her audience, or would their reaction force her to confront the specters of self-doubt once again? Emily awoke the next morning with a start, the remnants of her late-night thoughts clinging to her consciousness. The sun filtered through the curtains, illuminating the chaos of her small apartment, books stacked haphazardly, coffee mugs abandoned half-finished, and papers scattered across her desk like a map of her scattered mind. The presentation loomed in her thoughts, its urgency driving the rhythm of her heartbeat. As she poured herself a cup of coffee, the bitter aroma filled her senses. She stared out the window, the bustling street below mirroring the turmoil inside her. It occurred to her that today would be the first day of her preparation, one marked not just by words, but by intention. She resolved to frame her narrative around the core themes of her expertise: resilience and revelation in the face of historical injustice. This was her moment to contribute uniquely to the academic conversation. Settling at her desk, Emily opened her laptop. The blinking cursor on the blank document mocked her resolve, sparking a wave of self-doubt. What if she was not prepared enough? Would her insights resonate? But she quickly cut through the anxious whisper of doubt, reminding herself of her responsibilities as an educator. She had spent years embracing history's complexities. It was time to weave personal anecdotes into her work, stories that would connect her audience to the material and reveal her authentic self. As she typed, the words began to flow, framing a narrative that pulsated with her passion. Each anecdote recounted became a thread, stitching together her past experiences, both failures and triumphs. She explored moments where her resolve was tested, how certain lectures had altered the way her students perceived the world, instilling in them a desire not just to learn history, but to engage with it critically. In this exploratory phase, she discovered unexpected strengths within herself. For every fear that attempted to anchor her, she now embraced the lessons of her past. She realized she was a master storyteller. Her classroom transformed into a stage where history could be dramatized, and complex concepts became approachable. Then came a revelation that struck her like lightning. Who was she if not someone who combated fear with knowledge? A kernel of personal resilience grew within her, igniting a determination to show her colleagues not just her expertise but her journey, a narrative that resonated beyond textbooks and lectures. This would not only include the historical injustices of the past but also their implications in the present, weaving a tapestry that was both educational and liberating. With her ideas crystallizing, she pushed back against the landscape of potential rejection that clouded her vision. There would be questions, of course. Perhaps divisions among her colleagues regarding her methods or interpretations would arise. But in that moment, her resolve deepened. They could interpret her work however they wished. Their skepticism could be the catalyst for deeper discussion about the role history plays in shaping societal narratives. Yet, the specter of vulnerability veered dangerously close, whispering warnings about inadequacy, about missed opportunities. Emily had to confront an uncomfortable truth. While she was preparing for an outward presentation, the most significant battle was the one she faced internally. In and out of classrooms, her greatest challenge was to lessen the weight of external validation and embrace self-acceptance. After hours of drafting and reshaping her presentation, she stepped back and surveyed her work. It felt alive, a reflection of her growth. Could she allow this narrative to empower herself rather than imprison her? The time had come to confront the question that gnawed at her. The answer did not lie in perfection or conformity, but in authenticity. with a newfound sense of purpose, Emily saved her draft. She stepped away from her desk, her heart racing. The next hurdle loomed larger, requiring action rather than mere contemplation. Following the urging pulse that grew within her, she decided to seek input from trusted colleagues. How they would respond, she did not know. Would they bolster her newfound confidence or stir her insecurities? The moment of connection sparked an electrifying thrill. The vulnerability was out in the open, blooming into something that could reshape her understanding of collaboration and feedback. She recalled the feeling of acceptance that had eluded her so long. Would sharing her draft provide a pathway toward overcoming her deep-seated fears? As she took her telephone and dialed the number of her most trusted colleague, uncertainty danced in her stomach once more. The challenge ahead extended far beyond the presentation. It was about transforming her identity within her professional realm. Would she emerge with renewed self-assurance, or would this endeavor tether her further to her insecurities? As the ringing continued, Emily held her breath, mentally preparing for the plunge into vulnerability that awaited her. The call connected, and Emily could hear a soft voice on the other end. It was Lila, her confidant and a fellow faculty member who shared her passion for history. "Hey, you called." Lila greeted, her cheerfulness cutting through Emily's anxiety. "Hi, Lila," Emily replied, struggling to keep her tone steady. This was at the moment she had wrestled with all morning. "I'm working on this presentation, and I really need your input." The words tumbled out, laden with urgency. "Of course. What's it about?" Lila's interest piqued, encouraging Emily to open up. Taking a deep breath, Emily launched into a description of her narrative, the anecdotes she planned to share, and the themes she wanted to explore. As she spoke, she sensed the energy swirling within her, teetering between excitement and trepidation. Lila listened intently, asking questions that pushed Emily to clarify her thoughts and articulate her ideas fully. "Remember when you discussed the civil rights movement in class?" Lila prompted, her tone encouraging. "Could you incorporate a personal reflection from that? It could be so powerful." An electric spark ignited in Emily's mind. Yes, she had tackled the topic in depth but had only brushed the surface of her personal connection to it. The stories of her grandmother, who had marched for equality, could not only add authenticity to her presentation but also weave a familial narrative that resonated across generations. As she shifted gears and began to incorporate family history into her draft, Emily felt an unfamiliar warmth blooming within her. The blend of personal experience and historical context transformed her preparation from a mere academic exercise into a vibrant tapestry woven with emotion and legacy. "Wow, Emily, this is coming together beautifully," Lila enthused. "I can hear how passionate you are. I can't wait to see it." Emily's heart swelled with a mixture of gratitude and newfound confidence. "Thank you for helping me see that," she said quietly, the harsh edges of anxiety softening. As the conversation drew to a close, Lila added, "You know, if you need more feedback, I can invite some other colleagues to discuss it. New perspectives could really enhance your presentation." The suggestion filled Emily with a cocktail of dread and exhilaration. The idea of opening herself up again to more criticism was daunting, yet it felt like a crucial step in solidifying her growth. Could she handle the potential scrutiny of her peers beyond Lila's support? Just the thought made her gut twist. "I'll think about it," she replied, her tone contemplative. As she hung up, the silence of her apartment enveloped her, a stark contrast to the lively exchange moments before. Inside, a cosmic struggle brewed between the urge to protect herself from further vulnerability and the desire to embrace this opportunity for development. She paced her living room, grappling with the question, would further exposure strengthen her resolve or fracture her fragile newfound confidence? She glanced at her laptop, the document flickering like a beacon of possibility. Emily's thoughts ignited again, this time fueled by Lila's encouragement. What if she could invite empathy and dialogue, rather than just feedback? The vision of a collaborative critique, a gathering of minds sharing in her vision, sparked hope. But the potential fallout from such exposure lingered like a ghost in the periphery of her resolve. With trembling determination, she began drafting an email, her fingers hesitating above the keys. Should she extend this invitation? Every part of her wanted to hide her vulnerability, yet an equally strong part urged her to step into the light to present not just her work, but the story of her development. The urge to grow, to confront the anxiety head-on, wrestled against her instinct for self-protection. This was where she could either shatter or fortify her identity in this professional world. As her resolve crystallized, she pressed send with a shaky finger, feeling like she had just jumped off a cliff without knowing how deep the water below was, and in that moment of transition, a new kind of fear stirred within her, the fear of success, and what it meant to pull on the threads of potential she had barely begun to understand. With the avalanche of thoughts cascading through her mind, the question loomed larger than life: could she truly reconcile her two identities, the vulnerable, self-doubting individual and the empowered, passionate educator ready to impact lives? As anticipation and uncertainty intertwined, Emily braced herself to finally confront what it meant to move from isolation into engagement, from critique into collaboration. The real challenge awaited her next: a gathering of colleagues, and perhaps the very judgment she had feared but also longed for. What truths would unfold in this crucible of feedback? Would she bask in newfound strength or recoil in the face of her deepest fears? The day arrived with a weighty stillness that seemed to hang in the air. Emily felt it in her bones, an amplified beating of her heart, every thump echoing the uncertainty that pooled in her stomach. The hour crept closer as she glanced at the clock. Each tick seemed to mock her indecision. Should she have invited more colleagues? What if their feedback shattered her fragile confidence? Or would their insights provide a key to an unmarked door of growth? Determination sparked within her. She had resolved to face this gathering. Lila's encouraging words had lifted her, and now she clung to that buoyancy. Emily mentally prepared the narrative of her family's involvement in the civil rights movement, the emotional anchor she hoped would resonate deeply with her colleagues. Would their responses reflect love and support, or would they slice through her narrative with razor-sharp critiques? As she gathered her notes and visual aids, the familiar clutter of her mind raced into chaos. What if they didn't understand her context? What if her personal connection wasn't deemed academic enough? The fear whispered insidiously, nudging at her self-doubts, while the representative of her fears, her own mind, conjured images of disinterest and scorn. Taking a deep breath, she pressed her fingers against the cool wood of her table, grounding herself. Focus, she muttered, a mantra to silence the impending storm. What did she want more? Protection or growth? The moment came as she stepped into the small conference room, a modest space adorned with history-laden posters. The familiar faces of her colleagues, some smiling warmly while others wore expressions akin to puzzled curiosity, greeted her. Each person was a potential collaborator, yet she felt their eyes peel away her layers of hesitation. "Thank you everyone for coming," Emily began, her voice steadier than she imagined possible. "I wanted to explore the intersections of personal history and broader narratives within our curriculum." The introduction flowed like a river, carrying her thoughts with it, and she found her footing. As Emily traversed through her presentation, she laid bare the compelling story of her grandmother, the marches, the hope, the struggle for equality. Relating her family's sacrifices to the lessons of history, she watched as faces began to illuminate with understanding. A connection was sparked, and their shared experience transformed the atmosphere. Amid serious nods, occasional smiles of recognition, and even a few thoughtful questions, Emily sensed a shift in herself. The synergy among the group was palpable. They weren't mere critics, they were fellow travelers on the journey of understanding. A moment arose when one colleague, Henry, leaned forward. "I didn't know that about your grandmother," he said, his tone warm yet inquisitive. "How do you think her story can influence our students' engagement with history?" This was exactly the dialogue she had hoped to encourage: collaboration over critique. The exchange provoked deeper thoughts from the group, unraveling unexpected layers within her initial narrative. Sharing insights, they began to discover connections between personal history and societal context together. Gradually, Emily began to weave their contributions into the presentation, integrating new perspectives that emerged from the discussions. It was no longer just her story, it grew into a collage of experiences, each thread painting a richer image of history itself. As the meeting tapered off, she realized her nerves had transformed into something far more empowering. Gratitude bloomed in her chest. She hadn't just introduced her narrative, she'd elicited their stories, too. "Thank you all for your insights today," she said, her voice reflective of newfound confidence. "This has made me think about the power we hold over the narratives we teach and how they can inspire our students in ways we haven't even explored yet." But as the conversation drew to a close, a fleeting thought disturbed the tranquility of her achievement. Had they truly absorbed the weight of the histories shared, or had they merely skimmed the surface? Would they leave this room changed, or would it become a forgotten moment swept away by the currents of routine? The questions lingered, a veil of uncertainty hanging before her. Emily had discovered strength in connection, yet felt a fragment of doubt creeping in. Perhaps understanding wasn't simply about sharing stories, but about ensuring those stories elicited genuine reflection and change. As she gathered her things to depart, her heart raced again, but this time, it was not fear that propelled her steps, it was exhilaration. Each new realization felt as if it carved a pathway to depth in her work, a journey she had only begun to explore. What would her next presentation become, with this burgeoning collaborative energy? And how could she ensure that this transformative dialogue sustained beyond this first encounter? Those questions fueled her thoughts as she left the room, stepping into the unknown future that awaited her. As Emily made her way down the dimly lit hallway, the echo of her colleagues' laughter lingered in her ears, a stark contrast to the quiet apprehension that still clung to her heart. The montage of insights shared during the meeting stirred within her, fishing for answers that resided just out of reach. Had they truly engaged with her story, or had it been merely a pleasant distraction from their own routines? The weight of the remaining questions pressed into her chest, but she couldn't deny the flicker of excitement sparked by the collaborative energy she had cultivated. This moment felt pivotal, a threshold crossed into a realm of potential that she had longed to explore. Back at her desk, she replayed the exchanges in her mind, reflecting on their verbal cues, the way glimmers of understanding lit up in their eyes as she spoke. Each question posed to her felt like a thread pulled from a much larger tapestry, one depicting their collective experiences and how they intersected with the stories they were entrusted to teach. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table, notes sprawled before her like a puzzle she'd yet to solve. How could she extend the conversation? Turning inwards, she recognized a crucial concept: retention was about resonance. The stories they shared could not be mere anecdotes, they had to transform lives. But how? Determined to synthesize her thoughts into actionable steps, Emily jotted down a framework for her next session. She considered different strategies. Perhaps having a follow-up workshop would allow each person to present their stories, facilitating deeper connections. But would they feel comfortable enough to share? What if their vulnerability fell flat, suspended in the air like disconnected breaths? She stopped writing for a moment, feeling the repetition of her fears clawing back into focus. And then, a revelation broke through the fog of doubt. What if she created a platform that celebrated each personal narrative? One way to ensure engagement and facilitate genuine reflection would be to center the discussions around their own histories, allowing them to draw parallels with the material they were teaching. By stepping outside structured limits, they could cultivate a space enriched by personal stakes. With each stroke of her pen, an urgency ignited within her. Emily envisioned an interactive exploration, a series of amalgamated narratives emphasizing the human experiences behind history. The real challenge was awakening her colleagues to the significance of their own stories. Many were brilliant minds, but how often did they connect that brilliance with the emotional truths of their lives? Later that night, as she prepared for bed, one last thought nudged at her: would she be ready for pushback? Challenging the status quo often met with resistance. But hadn't she just fostered an environment ripe for discussion? What if she fortified her approach with a vulnerability of her own, a shared experience that radiated authenticity? Just as she began to formulate a plan of self-disclosure, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a message from Henry, thanking her for today and asking if they could discuss some ideas he had in mind for how to enhance student engagement with their histories. His enthusiasm, palpable even through a screen, filled her with warmth and anticipation. Emily realized this was her moment. She could either shy away from this connection out of fear or embrace it as a catalyst for growth both for herself and for her colleagues. The thrill of discovery sparked anew. The idea of their conversation being more than a casual lunch gathering electrified her. The next day, once again stepping into the familiar hum of academia, Emily felt the tension shift ever so slightly in the air. This time, she walked in with determination, ready to carry the conversation forward. But just as she was about to sit down with Henry, her mentor approached her, a serious look on her face. "Emily," she began, "I've heard about your presentation. We need to talk about what this means moving forward." The gravity of the statement weighed heavily. The moment of truth had arrived. The stakes were higher than she anticipated, and with it came an uncomfortable clarity. Not everyone might be on board with her vision. What would she say to that? Would she defend her approach, her burgeoning ideas and philosophies? The very thoughts she had assumed were merely personal had now become her professional battleground, and the stakes felt monumental. With newfound clarity, Emily squared her shoulders, ready to confront whatever those forthcoming words might bring. In the following days, each morning greeted Emily with a blend of excitement and trepidation. The inkling of her own transformation reverberated this time. She had the power to command the narrative, reshaping not just her teaching approach but who she was as a professional in academia. She found herself standing at a crossroads, poised to share her vision with a broader audience. As the scheduled meeting with her mentor approached, apprehension clutched at her heart. Yet, with every passing hour, an undeniable sense of purpose coursed through her. Emily had unearthed a profound truth within her lessons. Inspiration ignited when stories intersected the lives of those who heard and told them. She was no longer a passive participant in her professional space. She was ready to actively engage, to invite her colleagues into the narratives woven through history. When she entered the meeting room, Emily felt a sense of electric anticipation. Her mentor's composed demeanor signaled formality, but beneath it, she sensed an openness to discussion. "Your presentation generated a lot of interest," her mentor began, eyebrows raised in curiosity. "But tell me, Emily, what does this mean for your positioning within the department?" Taking a deep breath, Emily realized this was her moment to affirm her identity no longer defined solely by past failures. "I want to inspire deeper connections with history, highlighting its relevance today," she stated, her voice steady. "By engaging our students through personal narratives, we can foster critical thinking and empathy. We can inspire them to become participants in their own historical stories." As she spoke, Emily's confidence swelled. It was as if the very essence of her experiences, the struggles, the lessons learned, became tangible, enveloping the room in conviction. Her mentor listened intently, a keen gaze reflecting the storm of thoughts behind her eyes. "Empathy through storytelling is commendable," she replied, pausing to contemplate. "But how will you measure its success? How do we ensure students take these lessons to heart?" The question, though probing, did not undermine Emily's resolve. Instead, it spurred her onward, solidifying her purpose. "I want to implement a feedback loop where students share their experiences and reflections on how these stories resonate with their lives," Emily responded. "By establishing a safe space for dialogue, we could track their emotional and intellectual growth." Her idea hung in the air, bright with potential. Her mentor nodded, impressed. "I see. Perhaps a pilot program could be arranged, something small to start with." The conversation evolved, weaving itself into a robust framework Emily had visualized for weeks. Ideas flourished, and gradually, her mentor's expressions shifted from cautious skepticism to enthusiastic engagement. The synergy created a transformative atmosphere that left Emily invigorated. Weeks rolled on as the pilot program took shape. Students entered the classroom, curious yet guarded. With Emily's heart racing, she introduced the concept. They would share stories from their own lives and connect them to the historical narratives they explored. The apprehension in her students mirrored her own early fears, but as days turned into weeks, the ice began to melt. With each session, laughter mingled with serious discussions, the classroom blossoming into a sanctuary of connection that it culminated in a vibrant showcase where students presented their reflections, enveloping the audience in a magnetic energy. Emily sat in the back, tears glimmering at the corners of her eyes, witnessing the metamorphosis of indifference into understanding. History isn't just in textbooks, it's woven into the threads of our lives, one student articulated confidently, drawing audible gasps from classmates. The classroom transformed, and alongside it, Emily felt her identity solidifying, a recognized conduit between knowledge and human experience. As the program concluded, feedback poured in, not merely of approval, but profound insights that resonated deeply among her students and colleagues alike. "You've reignited our passion for learning," a fellow teacher remarked. "You've shown us that history isn't just dates, but stories that connect us all." Each affirmation punctuated the tapestry of Emily's journey, illuminating how she had evolved not just as a teacher, but as a mentor, guiding her students toward harnessing their own voices. The approval was tangible. It validated her arduous path from vulnerability and uncertainty to a position of strength and recognition. Now, embracing her new professional identity, Emily felt a solid confidence blooming within her. She held a place of respect in her department, a historic educator harnessing the intersection of personal and academic narratives to ignite passion in others. No longer afraid of her past, she rather championed it, allowing it to inform her guiding philosophies. In that moment, Emily realized she had achieved what she once doubted. She had seized the opportunity to transform not just a classroom, but also herself, proving that the journey of self-discovery is ongoing, filled with challenges, triumphs, and the beautiful complexity of human stories. As Emily stepped outside the school, a deep satisfaction enveloped her. The shadows that once trailed her were now mere fragments of a narrative that had become an essential part of who she was. With every step forward, she felt empowered to share her journey with the world, a story echoing with the truth of perseverance and connection. Now more than ever, she was ready to uplift others, embracing the call that lay ahead. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share.